Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hartley. This podcast exists to equip and inspire your heart-centered leadership. Every week, we bring interviews with some of the greatest heart sets and mindsets on the planet. I hope the heartprint of our time spent together is that it creates new possibilities for you and all those you come into contact with. If you'd like to explore what we could make possible for you, then head to abty.co.uk/connect and book in a free 30-minute call to begin our journey together. I just want to express a huge amount of gratitude to our sponsors, Exhale Coffee. I have been a big fan of Exhale Coffee since meeting Alex and the team back in 2022. Exhale is the first coffee to be sourced, roasted and lab tested specifically to maximize its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potency. An independent lab test has shown that 1 cup of Exhale Coffee has the same antioxidant power as 1.8 kilos of blueberries or 55 oranges. I'm a huge fan, and Mrs. H loves the decaf, especially because she knows that Exhale use the mountain water decaffeination process, which uses only pure glacial water from the highest mountain in Mexico and no nasty chemicals. Simply head to exhalecoffee.com/ABTY for your special offer. And lastly, before I introduce this week's guest, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would really help us leave a greater heartprint on this world. On episode 279, what a joy it is to welcome Dr. Rollin McCraty to the podcast. Dr. Rollin is the Director of Research at the HeartMath Institute. He's been with HeartMath since its founding in 1991. The HeartMath Institute, they have a vision, a kinder, heart-centered world where we care for one another and live harmoniously in peace. We have a like-hearted vision for the world. HeartMath and Always Better Than Yesterday joined in this wonderful conversation. The HeartMath Institute is committed to helping awaken the heart of humanity. And the wonderful thing that they're able to do is to bring science to an intellect-driven world. You're going to hear all about the science of the heart in this conversation, and I hope it awakens your heart. It fosters a kinder, more heart-centered leadership, and one where we can join on this journey in encouragement of each other. It's episode 279 with Dr. Rollin McCraty. Rollin, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you, my brother?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Nice to meet you and have a chat here today. Looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I was just saying to you off air, like my background was in policing. And I was one of these guys that was talking about heart on my sleeve, heart-based, love-based leadership. And I didn't have like the gift of being able to articulate it in such a way where you and your colleagues at the HeartMath Institute have done so incredibly well, which is bringing the science to this wonderful thing about the heart. And one of the great things that I think you do is you bring to life that it's so much more than a metaphor.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I don't just now learning that you have a background in policing, so I just have to share a story with you.
Yeah, please.
There was a gentleman visiting here. Oh, this was about a year ago, I think now, and had been in Europe, and I forget why he was here for, but he said, "Yeah, I was in the Netherlands, and I got pulled over, and I got a ticket for speeding." And I told the officer, I said, "This is the most pleasant ticket I've ever received." And the officer says, "Oh, well, that's because we've been trained in HeartMath."
No, come on.
I'm serious. So I think 60,000 police officers in the Netherlands have been all trained in the HeartMath approach. So
Brilliant. I want to circle back round to this because I want to know why it's even relevant for police officers to be trained in HeartMath. But let's go to anybody that's hearing the term HeartMath for the first time. Tell us about the organization. Tell us the wonderful things you're doing with HeartMath.
that's always a challenging one. It sounds, well, what is HeartMath? Well, the simplest way I can say it, Ryan, is HeartMath is really a science-backed or science-validated system of tools, techniques, and technologies that help us get the heart and brain in sync and help us connect with that deeper part of ourself and bring that, what we call heart intelligence, into our day-to-day lives. So it's really, about how do we self-regulate? How do we maintain our composure in the middle of the chaos that might be going on? And that's why it's relevant for a police officer or somebody
Mm.
right there. So we have our techniques are really based on a pretty deep understanding, deep dive into the science of our physiology, and which is how do we get our internal rhythms and organs and systems working together more harmoniously, which is what we call heart coherence or a coherent state.
Mm. My last name's Hartley, so I feel like there's some sort of destiny I've always had about pursuing all matters of the heart. Like, when did you really become devoted and passionate about understanding more about the heart?
Well, okay. I'll try and do a short version of that. So my original career was communication engineering. Used to work for Motorola,
Hmm.
um, and so I always had a deep curiosity for how things work.
Hmm.
I grew up in a small farming community, and my grandfather was the town mechanic. So I grew up in taking things apart and understanding how things work, and I think I kind of came in with that curiosity and sense of adventure in a way from early childhood. Anyway, I would always be asking, professors and university and this and that, well, what is a magnetic field? What is gravity? Well, here's the formula. No, 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 no. That describes how it behaves. I get that. What is it? No, no, don't ask that. Go away. More or less. They didn't say it. They were a little nicer, but that was basically what they were saying. So that led me to, I don't know, I actually discovered a book at the University of Nebraska bookstore once this would be back in the 70s, somewhere, early 70s, mid 70s, somewhere in there. And it was talking about consciousness. First time I'd ever even thought of this, right?
Hmm.
So anyway, long story short, I moved to California and got a degree in consciousness studies,
Yeah.
if you will. This is kind of before it was so popular.
Mm.
Yeah, one of the probably the first degree, official degree granting institutions in this
Mm.
kind of field. So I did that. So I learned about meditation and this and that. And that was where I first learned about the heart, and the chakras and this and that.
Mhm.
And you know, um, long story short, I ended up through that group helping bring spirulina to the world,
Mhm.
if you will, to the Western world anyway. We're the first company to do that, and there, the it's when I'll say my idealism bubble got popped. Having I learned the power of supermarket rag magazines. National Enquirer. This is in the very early 80s, did a front page story on spirulina. Like the headlines were something like lose weight and never be hungry again, or doctor's praise, new dot dot dot, something like that. So the little company that I was running, we built it up from nothing, right, to about 150,000 a month in sales, which wasn't bad. In the next 2 week period, I personally wrote about a little under $20 million in sales of spirulina.
Wow.
Yeah, so we took the profits of that and went to the desert, Southern California out in the deserts to prove that you could grow spirulina and feed the world's hungry populations.
Mm.
I actually did it way ahead of its time,
Yeah.
and where my idealism bubble got popped, because this is a true humanitarian thing. We're going to feed the world's hungry people. There's a
Yeah.
solution. It went nowhere,
Mm.
absolutely nowhere.
Mm.
And that was because of it was, so I have a degree in consciousness, right? And I meditate and all this stuff, right? Well, uh,
Mm.
it was really the lack of will at political levels is why it was blocked,
Mm.
and in some cases, just not wanting people to be fed, I mean, it was just the bureaucracy, and so I basically said, the heck with it. It wasn't my true word, but um, this humanitarian stuff, I'm going to go make money again. So I started another company. I started a company with a friend of mine, which became very successful. And in our third year, we were doing 20 million in sales,
Mm.
something like that. And there I realized that there was this deeper inner sense in me that another sports car in the driveway wasn't going to quite do it. Don't get me wrong. I had a great time. It was a really fun ride,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there was something deeper, and that's when I met, actually through some connections back to the spirulina stuff, some friends, Doc Childre, who's the founder of HeartMath, and but I knew about the heart at that point, right?
Mm.
No, I didn't. That's what I learned very quickly. That because in most of the approaches we talk about the heart, and it's really more of a metaphor. And when I met him, I realized, no, this is real. And what he's in his background in research, and he helped facilitate my first real, I'd say, heart opening to where I was able to pop into another dimensional understanding. And so then I decided to sell that company and join with him and some others to help him found HeartMath.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's there'll be a film coming of that journey, I'm sure of it. But one of the things you said, the words consciousness, and in one of your papers, you almost like make the attempt to define it, which was like this awareness or sentience among sentient beings. And I just paused when I read that sentence because it's almost like there's an aspect of our nature that we've forgotten. It's almost saying an awareness or sentience among sentient beings. That implies that our true nature is to be sentient. Like, how is it that we've just come so far away from our true nature?
Yeah, that would be true. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and consciousness is one of those things. That's an attempt to put something in a scientific paper, right?
Yeah.
One of my mentors, Ryan, was you might have heard of him, Carl Pribram.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard. He's
No.
a pretty famous dude in neurosciences. He's considered by many to be the father of modern cognitive neuroscience. I
Yeah.
mean, he's somehow he took a liking to me in our work and got intrigued, and he was a regular. He would actually come visit here every year until he got too old to do it for a week or spend a week or two here
Mm.
every year. And where'd Carl go? He disappeared into the Santa Cruz Mountains somewhere. uh, and I have a lot of stories from him and learned a lot from him. But one of we get into consciousness discussions, and he was the father of what's called the holographic perception theory, among many other things, about how does the brain really perceive and
Mm.
create a wholeness out of all these inputs and things. And one of the things early on he'd say, well, consciousness, we first have to. Are we talking about little c consciousness or big C consciousness? Right. That's
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's the originator of that way of saying it, but he would be one of the early people. Little c consciousness being the kind of consciousness that a neuroscientist thinks about and talks about.
Yeah.
Kind of what I was talking about in that paper and that kind of a framing. So we're right now you and I are hopefully conscious, Ryan. We're talking, we're having a conversation, and we're sentient beings, right? But we go to sleep, we're unconscious.
Mm. Mm.
That's little c, that, or we have deficits in our awareness, through a brain injury or a stroke.
Mm.
And then big C consciousness would be the type of consciousness that a lot of people talk about, including myself, that you could think of as an extended consciousness, the kind that connects
Mm.
us, non-locally, or the
Mm.
consciousness that's behind the creation of the universe, right? Or so on.
I love that distinction because it's, I think Dr. Bruce Lipton is a huge advocate of your work, and he's been on the show a couple of times. So our audience will be familiar with the statistic that he shares that, 95% of our, time is from a subconscious part, part of our brain. And yeah, it's, I find this really fascinating. And, I'd love to know what are some of the groundbreaking what are the core aspects that you have found with HeartMath in terms of the heart and how we connect with it? What are some of the I don't want to say benefits because it's not like a transactional thing. Connect with your heart and you'll get these things, but what is the impact and the possibility of being more heart
Yeah.
centered?
But that is true, though. We connect with the hearts, and we get a lot of these things,
Hmm.
unexpected things. So that's a discussion we can have on several different levels.
Hmm.
And like if I'm talking with the military group, and I by the way, kind of honored to say we developed the resilience program for the U.S. Navy
Wow.
and their highest risk mission during a long period there. So I personally trained about 5,000 men and women on the who are getting ready to play on the highest risk mission of anything in the mental health anyway in the military. So if I'm talking to that kind of an audience, I can keep it pretty much on a physiological level, very science-based. And a lot of people don't realize that the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. I mean, that's becoming more, I hear people talking about that a lot now, but kind of quoting probably me on a lot of that. But I didn't discover that. I mean, that's been known since the late 1800s. It's basic anatomy. Like the vagus, just to give you an example, the main neural pathway that connects the brain and the body, but the heart especially, it's called the vagus nerves. A lot of talk about them these days. Two of them, they come down through the front of our body. It's the longest nerve in the body, and it's not the largest in terms of neural fibers, but it's close. Thousands of neural fibers in each one of the two vagus nerves. There's one on each side and coming down through the front. 90% of those wires or those neural fibers are carrying information from the body back to the brain. Only 10% are brain down. And the majority of those are literally coming from the heart and cardiovascular system. Right. So it's the glands and organs in the thoracic cavity. It's, basically above the diaphragm that is where it's connecting us. So, well, that's shocking for a lot of people, and psychology used to be based on this understanding, by the way.
Right.
William James, you might know that name, kind of the father of modern psychology, 1880s to the 1930s. This was well understood, and but that got lost, and forgotten. It all became about the brain, right? And then the pendulum started shifting back to a more realistic and balanced perspective, really in the 1970s, when a particular research group, well, maybe back up a little bit, Ryan, because at that time, people actually believed that the nervous system was just there for the brain to tell the body what to do. And theoretically, you could cut the head off, and if it had the blood and oxygen, it'd be just fine. People really believe that at this era, right? I mean, that's considered ridiculous now to even think that way. But so in the 70s, what this particular research group discovered was that the autonomic nervous system, the nerves connecting body and brain, weren't just this dumb thing that was the brain telling the body what to do.
Yeah.
And in fact, that what the first observations were, see, at that time, we've got our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic, and you send more signals down the sympathetic, everything speeds up, and parasympathetic, it slows down. A very simplistic model. And so, but what they discovered was, well, no, the heart in particular was making its own decisions. So you could have sympathetic activations, heart rate should be speeding up, but it slowed down instead, right? And vice versa, right? So, in fact, in reading I studied the literature of that era, they were literally talking about the heart is acting as though it has a mind of its own.
Yeah.
In scientific papers. Of course, this was heresy.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of flack. They ended up winning all kinds of career awards and being proven right. And not only that, the heart was somehow apparently predicting what the brain needed to do next and sending the right kind of neural signals to the brain to facilitate or reject its activity. So they ended up introducing two terms back then to describe the types of effects that the neural signals the heart was sending to the brain had on brain function: cortical inhibition or cortical facilitation.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So a lot of our work builds on the shoulders of their findings, right? Which we've taken that, of course, maybe another level or two in understanding. But so, and it's really true. So what some of our early work in our lab here, we're basically a psychophysiology lab at our core, that was the first to take a deeper look at what's now called heart rate variability, right? And so to give listeners who may not know what that is, it's pretty popular out there now, but it wasn't even called heart rate variability when we started looking into it, but was looking at a lot of physiology, brain waves and blood pressure and hormone. We did all that stuff back in the 90s, but that what we found, to make a long story short again here, was that of all the organs in the body, the heart was most reflective of our emotional state. And the way it was being reflected, that you could see it, was in the changing patterns of the heart rhythm. So what heart rate variability is that means that the time between each and every pair of heartbeats is always changing. So the heart is not a metronome like a lot of people still believe. Some people still believe that. Most don't understand it's not true anymore. But so we have a rhythm. So without that beat to beat variability, there would be no heart rhythm, right? So the heart rhythm is always changing up and down, and creating these patterns. And those patterns are reflecting emotional states. Like anxiety looks like a very chaotic looking pattern, or anger even worse, right? Impatience, these types of things. But we were some of the first to really look at what people would tend to call positive emotions. This is long before the positive psychology movement and these types of things, which I'm thrilled about. And what we found is that when people have, I'll call them heartfelt feelings of compassion, appreciation, kindness, love, is not only did the heart rhythm change, but it actually shifts into a different, what we now call coherent state. So it's kind of rolling hills, sine wave pattern. But a lot has to be going on inside of our physiology for that to happen. So things are synchronizing. The blood pressure rhythms, the heart rhythms, the respiratory rhythms, the activity between the heart and brain. So the brain waves are becoming more synchronous with the heart. All that's going on to create that, what we now would call a coherent heart rhythm, which we now, hundreds of studies later, I can pretty confidently say is the physiological state of optimal performance. Right? Reaction times are increased, sensory motor integration is improved, but especially we're able to think better, make clearer decisions. And if we're able to, and so once we understood that, we were able to develop techniques that allow us to make that shift from an incoherent physiological state to a coherent one within a couple heartbeats, really, with practice. This is something that we have one meditation technique out of the, I'd say, 8 core HeartMath techniques. One is really a heart-focused meditation. All of the other ones are really about how do we make that shift into coherence in the middle of the busy daily life, right? When I'm trying to get the kids out the door to school, or dealing with a difficult customer, or if you're a police officer, the chaos, how do I really maintain that coherence, that inner composure, and facilitate brain function rather than inhibit it in those critical moments? That makes sense, Ryan?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I just, the thing that I'm thinking about is, what's the master key? What is the master key that controls it all? Is it, because I know that sometimes our thoughts can make things worse, because we can think the worst case scenario, and we get that physiological loop of, oh my God, I'm dying. Like, can thoughts also be a master key? Like, how do
Oh,
you?
yeah, yes. Yes and no. So there's boy, you ask good questions, but I just can't allow myself to give simple.
Yeah, it's okay. We're good for it.
Because these things aren't as simple. So there's a whole psychology, a whole belief system in psychology, that emotions follow thoughts. Change the stinking thinking, right? Change the thought, you change the emotion, change the behavior. Well, that's sort of true. It is true. It's just not complete. And that is that for kind of, you talked about Bruce Lipton, that most of what we do is unconscious. Well, like Bruce lives 13 miles from here, by the way.
Well, if you do meet him, please give him a hug from me.
If I see him, I hardly ever see him, but anyway, in the neurosciences, it's very clear emotions happen often before thought, and most of the time, and most of as we navigate through the day, and all the little things that come up and the little decisions we make, that's really emotion happening first. And then the thoughts are really trying to justify and sort out what we already felt.
Yeah, it makes me think, because you talk about the heart being more than just a pump, that it's actually a, because I'm sure we'll get onto it in a minute, about the signals that go out into the field. But as I understand it, there's a two-way interaction, right? The heart receives information from the field and then puts it back out again. And I just wonder what type of information is being received from the field, and
Yeah.
how does the heart go?
All right.
Oh,
Okay. So we're taking we'll take a step up the stairway here to the story. But that physiological language is what I'm just trying to say. I can keep it there if I'm talking to police officers or engineers, and they get it, right? Yeah, who wouldn't want to be able to maintain your composure
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
middle
yeah.
of the chaos, and be able to make that shift in the moment once they get onto it. So where you're taking me next, Ryan, is okay. So this comes in my engineering background, right? Radiational physics and all that.
Mm-hmm.
When we put electrodes on the chest to measure the electrocardiogram, right, or on the head to measure the electroencephalograph,
Mm-hmm.
called electrocardiogram because what we're measuring is current flow, electricity.
Yep.
So the electrodes, literally, that's all they see is the current flow, and that's why it's called the electrocardiogram. You're seeing the electrical impulses and so on. But basic physics, whenever there's a flow of electricity, you create a magnetic field. I mean, you can't get any more basic than this. But same thing in physiology. I mean, yeah, it's true of the power wires going, into your home. That current flow creates magnetic fields and so on. So when the current flows from the beating heart, that creates a magnetic field as well. Now the electrodes don't see that; they're just measuring current flow. So to measure the magnetic field, you need a different instrument. It's called a magnetometer, right? And so one of the qualities of a magnetic field is they go through things. This is why cell phones work indoors, right? It's the magnetic field that goes through the walls and the windows, and you can even be in an elevator, right, and have a cell phone call. So and of course, in our cell phone analogy, it's a great metaphor here. Well, it's not really a metaphor. Is that we're using those fields, those electric, in this case, there's an electric and a magnetic component, but the magnetic's the one going through things to carry information. The voice, if you're having a phone call or your text message, we're encoding that information on the field, and it's going from to the phone to the tower back to the phone, right? So we work the same way. So to measure the magnetic field of the heart, we use a magnetometer, and you can, of course, you're trying to get it close when you're trying to get good signal quality, but you can back that sensor up to about 3 feet and still detect the heartbeat. With a brainwave, you can back it up about an inch and you lose, right?
Wow.
So clearly the heart field is the big player when we're talking energetics, radiate these vibrations. So what we did this is all back in the 90s for us, we took and said, okay, well, can I use the same techniques that I used to use at Motorola to demodulate or look at the information being carried by the field to the field of the heart? And we could. It was actually pretty simple. And I was really shocked that nobody ever done it before. I mean, the magnetic field is well known. I actually, one of the books on the shelf behind me, a book on the history of bioelectromagnetism, has a graph in it that was where they accurately measured the magnetic field of the heart. They even got the shape right and all that in 1888.
Yeah, yeah.
This is not, but what we did was we were able to decode and see that magnetic field is carrying for sure information about our emotional state. And it actually mathematically reflects right back to the rhythm of the heart, the pattern of the heartbeats that's encoding in information. So you could think of it as pulse encoded information. So probably a lot more that we haven't decoded yet, but so that means quite literally, Ryan, that what we are feeling, whatever emotion we might be feeling, it doesn't stop at the skin. We are broadcasting that into our field environment. Now I said we can measure it 3 feet away, right? That's the sensitivity of today's instruments. Doesn't mean the field stops at 3 feet. If I just want to make that point, it's not just in fact, we've done experiments where we have people, we're looking at I'm going to say energetic communication going on between people physiologically, measurably, much greater distances than 3 feet. So our nervous system, let me back up. So not only are we broadcasting, that was neat to see that, right? You stick a probe out here and tell what somebody's feeling, you might put the plastic smile on, but if you're really feeling that maybe anxiety, or I'm not sure I trust this person, or whatever that, or you got some bad news right beforehand, you're still processing that. That's what we're broadcasting.
And we can feel that. We can intuitively feel that from people when the mood changes in a
Yeah,
room, or
exactly.
you just pick up on someone's just not their usual selves. We intuitively know that. One of the things you said earlier about the capital C and small c consciousness, am I right in understanding that there's our field and
Mhm.
then there's the field is almost like this wider divine intelligence that when we connect with the heart becomes the gateway to this space and time
Okay.
transcendence.
Well, great question. Thank you. But before I go there, you already said what I was going to, the next part of that, or the next step in that research was to show that I believe it's our nervous system is also a big antenna
Mhm.
that is exquisitely tuned to receiving information from other biologically generated fields. The fields we radiate are also the ones we receive. So it's this built-in communication, energetic communication system that is always going on between people.
I
Um,
I think
or team.
animals built off this, aren't they? Animals
Oh
don't
yeah,
have.
oh yeah. In fact, we've done horses and dogs, and they're
Yeah.
exquisitely sensitive to our emotions, and you can measure the changes, for example. So this becomes so important, though, right? In human
Mm,
communication,
mm,
right? Do I trust this person or not? So for most people, this is unconscious,
yeah.
still biasing, our perceptions, right? Our physiology is still detecting it and doing pattern recognition and all this stuff that's going on. So I just wanted to set that context, Ryan, before you answered your next question, because we are.
Well, let's just do a part two of that first bit, which is what are then the implications of me, Ryan Hartley, looking after my own energetics because I have children, I have loved ones, I have a community I lead, I have people listening to the podcast. Like, what's the responsibility on me and the impact that I can have then by what I'm putting out into my field?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me was a couple ways to answer that one as well. But like maybe a classic study, the first one that I know that was done, it was for a PhD dissertation study that I helped facilitate. And what he did in this study is he had recruited 40 people, and at four at a time put them around a table. Okay, four, so there's four out of them. So it's done not multiple times. And he trained three of them how to shift into coherence, and they had
Mm.
devices that that feedback your real-time coherence level, so they could practice making the shift into coherence and sustaining it for reasonable period of time. So then the fourth person in the group of four was naive to the real purpose of the experiment.
Yeah.
Okay, so I forget what it was. A really well done study. A lot of steps in the protocol. So at random times, the three people would shift into the state of coherence in a way that wasn't obvious what they were doing. And what they found overall, and not every person every time, but overall a pretty significant result is that for the naive person, when the others would shift into coherence, guess what happened to them?
Yeah. Come on.
They were lifted up to a higher state of coherence.
Wow. Come on.
No, this is all published. And
Yeah.
not only that, this has preceded a lot of work that's going on now. This particular study, he found that when you look across the four, that their heart rhythms were synchronizing with each other, and it kind of danced around.
Mm.
Like you and I might be in sync for a while, and then you might be in sync with one of the other people, and me with the other. But that dance of
Mm.
synchronization
Mm.
had its own rhythm, and this was true across all the groups.
Mm.
So really, a lot of fascinating and important stuff came out of that, especially when we move now to what in our work I call social coherence. Is that the physiological synchronization is a field, kind of like when I look back 30 years ago, coherence and heart-brain communication. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, right now it's pretty popular. So synchronization is kind of like that now. Um, when I'm talking, are we in sync or not physiologically, just not,
Mm.
emotionally,
Mm.
or
Mm.
do we believe the same thing or not? I'm talking about physiological and synchronization. So studies are already I'll use the word proving here. It's pretty solid data that when we can get in sync physiologically, our heart's in sync, that proceeds or certainly facilitates prosocial behaviors. We get along better, right? We're more productive in our teams and our groups. So the energy isn't going into all the posturing and the, you probably get what I mean, and all that tends to go on in team dynamics there. So
Well,
if people
you said
align,
you said
yeah.
something earlier that was around kind of political, appetite for some of these things, and the way that my mind goes is, well, if the powers that be were aware of the things that bring us into coherence, what how would I organize my society to take people out of coherence? What sort of music would I be putting in their ears? What sort of food would I be giving them? Like, I can only imagine that there's a number of things in our everyday environment that are taking us out of
Oh yes,
coherence.
we call it 3D, right?
Yeah, yeah.
3D, or a lot of people do. Oh yeah, watch the news,
Mhm.
right? For most people, but as a leader, if you once people really understand this, there are very practical things we can do to help create more coherent. Not only, but what starts with getting ourselves coherent, right? And it's kind of a saying that's emerged out of our research is, what am I feeding the field,
Hmm.
right? What's the information I'm putting out into the field?
That's
Because
an accountability question.
yeah, because that has measurable impacts on others, right? Are we helping lifting them into a state of coherence, um,
Mm,
or incoherence? You,
mm,
you actually alluded to it earlier, Ryan, when you were saying we know it's in our language,
mhm.
right? God, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Those kind of sayings, and
Yeah.
so we intuitively know this. We've just put science to it to actually measure it.
I know you do a lot of work with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I remember reading something in his book that says that when we're in this state of coherence, when we're in that heart space, we emit biophotons, which is literally like the measurement of light. I find that absolutely fascinating because when we say phrases like "you light up a room," it's literally coming to show that we actually emit light.
Yeah, well, we do, and biophotons, and in fact, it's hard to measure because they're weak and it's very expensive equipment. In fact, I'm next month I'll be visiting a lab in Madrid that is one of the first to actually measure whole body photon emission
Yeah,
in people in different emotional states.
yeah.
Right, so we're doing some collaboration together.
I look forward to following your journey on that. I think it's fascinating, and I think, I think one of the things is that I have a Christian faith, and one of the things obviously that talks about a doubting Thomas, and most of our society only believe because they've seen, and yet we believe in Wi-Fi. Yeah, we can't see it, but we believe it because we can see that our phone's connected, and then we get connected to the source of all things, the internet. But let's loop back round to my other question then. What is the possibility that we might create when we connect to the source of all that is life?
Yeah, so wow. All right, two ways. Can I answer that in two different ways?
Please.
Okay. So one, so we've been talking about where you guided me, the fields and the communication between us, right? Well, we also live within magnetic fields.
Hmm.
Everybody, you can't be on Earth and not be within the Earth's magnetic field, right? So we can't see the magnetic field, but we believe there's a North Pole and a South Pole because we have a compass and the needle turns and points that way, right? It's kind of an instrument for measuring the effect of the field on things. So here's it would take us an hour to really unpack this, but one of the magnetic fields, they have what are called magnetic field lines. I might invite most people, back in science class, back in grade school, we got to dump iron filings on a glass plate. Put the magnet under. If you didn't do it, you know what I'm talking about. You've
Yeah.
seen examples, right? So that those iron filings will kind of magically dance around and show you the shape of the field, whether it's a bar magnet or a horseshoe, whatever, right? But if you remember, Ryan, those iron filings lined up in parallel lines, although it's showing you the shape. So you're
Hmm.
also in that simple little experiment
Hmm.
able to visualize what are called magnetic field lines.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's what they're lining up when the lines of force are sometimes called, or flux lines. Well, here's the wild thing, and I didn't even, it was much later in my own career that I actually learned this. Even as a professional communication engineer, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
You can pluck magnetic field lines and they vibrate like guitar strings.
Whoa.
Right. So you have the Earth has very long magnetic field lines, right? Many hundreds of thousands of miles long, some cases, the outer ones. So what's plucking them is the solar wind, right? Rushing by, and Earth is turning to that, and it's plucking the strings. I have a great slide of visualization of it. They're vibrating. Well, this is another one of our projects that's called the Global Coherence Monitoring System. So we have magnetometers all around the Earth now, part of our research, that is specifically designed to measure these resonant frequencies, as they're called. Like if you have a guitar string and you pluck it, it has a resonant frequency.
Yeah.
Right. You change the tension or the length, and it changes its frequency. Well, here's the wild thing, and this is really wild to me. What we see in our magnetometers around the Earth, that one of the primary resonant frequency of, and these are called technically field line resonances, right? Vibrating, is exactly the same frequency as a human heart rhythm when we're in a coherent state.
Yeah. As above, so below.
So one of our hypotheses that we're in that project called the Global Coherence Initiative is that we are coupled through resonance. Like you have tuning forks. Everybody knows that experiment, I'm sure. You tap one and the other magically, right, starts to vibrate with it. Well, there you've got air molecules coupling, transferring the energy and information. But the takeaway message there is things that vibrate at the same frequency. You can easily transfer energy and information between them. Okay. Our biggest source of magnetic fields in the body, the heart, and the field lines are vibrating at the same frequency. So what we're suggesting here is that through resonance, we couple with that field, and there's no question that we're affected by the quality of the Earth's magnetic field. There's hundreds of studies that we don't like disturbed fields, right? Our physiology likes to be in sync. The newer data is starting to suggest it's actually a source of energy for us. Wow. When we're aligned with and in sync with the field, the energy of it. And when that field is disturbed, right, we don't do so well, right? That's a whole other story. But what I'm also suggesting, just like the cell phone example, it's a two-way communication street. We're also feeding information into that field that's coupled to the larger global field environment, right? Which we have other tools to measure now. That's yet another story. So this can help explain, for example, how do moms know when their kids are in harm's way or doing something they shouldn't be doing, and they're on the other side of the planet. Sometimes there's a very non-local intuition that goes on. There's a signal, has to be, right? That's mediating that. So that's part one answer to your question. Part two, if I may, is let me preface this by saying a guy that used to work here, head of our education department for a bunch of years, a really smart dude, 3 PhDs, was a professor, retired from UCLA. Well, one of his passions was the study of world religions. And I need to dig this up. He actually wrote a little paper on it, but that the most common thread between all the world's great religions, I bet you know what it is, that the heart is the source of connection to deeper wisdom, love, right, intelligence. That's universal. Well, I won't say universal, but it's Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, and on the list goes, is that idea of the heart being so one of the, trying to weave this story together here for you, one of the things we hear most from people who learn these coherence skills, HeartMath skills, is that their intuition's like on steroids. I mean, it's a noticeable shift, those that really take it seriously. And then the second thing they usually are often saying is, and synchronicities have become a way of life, or they're just out of hand now, noticeably. So I had the same experience most of us have here. So we embarked on a research journey, a very rigorous laboratory-based studies to see, well, can we measure this? Right. So we come up with a protocol. And I won't go into all the gory details. It's all published if people want to see this. But what we found was that I call it not, there's three types of intuition, what I would suggest, but in this, what I call non-local, the types of intuition that are something in time far away, or or far away in distance that you can't explain through the other types. But anyway, what we found was that the heart is the first to receive the intuitive information measurably. It sends a measurably different neural signal to the brain, and the brain gets it, right? Then there's a body response, the gut feeling, the hair on the back of the neck. So the gut gets the credit, but it's really heart, brain, body. And that body, the change in body is where it becomes a conscious feeling or perception. So the way I got that published back, this had been late 90s, I think, those series of papers and studies, was to say the heart appears to have access to a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space, non-local. So that's kind of, and that in that time, that's the way, that was perfectly acceptable language for peer-reviewed scientific journals. I'm a little more out of the closet, but well, let me ask you, Ryan, what's a field of information in this context outside the time and space?
Yeah, that's for me divine intelligence.
There you go.
Me, yeah,
right. Or I would say it's the a lot of people would call it your higher self, right? Or your spirit, your soul, right? Here at HeartMath, we just tend to say it's our larger self.
Yeah.
Because we, from my perspective, we are well, it's not just my perspective. We are multidimensional beings. They exist in different. We have to, to even be a living system.
Yeah, even last, I triangulate a lot of this. I love your work, and I love the science of it. I love the divine intelligence. But even with the Bible stuff I was reading last week, it was even Paul was talking the difference about about a wisdom that is not of this world versus carnal intelligence. Like carnal wisdom of man is different from wisdom of the divine, and yeah, I find that the more and more I make space for connecting with that, the more and more I'm given revelations that would be far beyond my own, imagination.
Well, or maybe it is you.
There we go. That's another conversation.
Think about what I just said. If we truly are multidimensional beings,
Yeah,
and we do have let's just say a higher self or a larger self, that's part of our undivided wholeness, right? We just don't have access to it until 100%. We raise our consciousness vibration.
Yeah.
Right. So then I'm really quite these days pretty happy to say this. We have the physical heart, and then what I call or not just me, it's been called this for a long time, the energetic heart. So the energetic heart is that bridge between our 3D human little c consciousness, and the higher dimensional consciousness.
Yeah,
that's part of our undivided wholeness. So at the energetic heart level, that's what's in communication with all the DNA. It's the blueprint at that level who we really are. Right. I mean, yes, the physical DNA is our eye color and boy, girl, all that stuff. Yeah. But that was one of the big surprises in mapping the human genome. Right. Where's all the missing information? It's not even close to being enough. Right. So I'm just suggesting that's at the energetic heart level, which is that bridge to our, larger selves, soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Well, this is bringing us nicely into one of my final big questions for this conversation, because we've been fortunate enough to spend time with Neil Donald Walsh on the podcast, and he talks about So Neil he talks about what you've just said. He says, "We are to God as a wave is to the ocean," i.e., that we're not separate. We're a momentary expression of that. So taking that kind of perspective, what we've just said, one of the things in your most recent study that you shared on LinkedIn from August 2024, I think it's your Global Coherence Project.
Yeah, Global Consciousness Project.
Global Consciousness Project, sorry. One of the things that you hypothesize is about a critical mass of people creating heart-centered states and the impact that those people have. But you also then go on to use this term spontaneous synchronization. And it got me thinking about something I saw on Gaia, the platform. They were talking about some spiritual phenomenon that happened at the point of 9/11. Some guy was talking, he said, it was just like people started to act as if they were one. It's like they just mobilized, they just got on
Mhm.
And seeing that kind of in context of your paper, it really kind of it, something was given to me as this image that just says, what if that is the truth of who we are? That we are a organism that isn't meant to be operating as a perceived illusionary individual, but what if our heart-centeredness is part of our next phase of evolution? What if our human evolution is to become humanity as one organization? Like, what was your perspective on what I've just said?
That's absolutely right.
Mm,
It's my, it's not a what if to me.
come on.
I mean, it's what's going to happen when we do that. You know, a lot of people talk
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
shift in consciousness. That is the shift that we're describing, that we're in the middle of. You know, I mean, it seems like the world's in chaos and turmoil, and it is.
Mm,
That's from another perspective that has to happen for the shift to occur. Right. So it's that turbulence phase for the next level of consciousness to emerge from it. So
mm,
that's how I see it. Because if I'm right, and it's our larger self
yeah.
that and through coherence, we're accessing that. So it's, because I'm not saying the mind and the brain are bad guys. I'm just saying that we need them. I want one, and I want it to work really well, right? But it does. But humanity's baseline consciousness needs a new
Mm,
operating system,
mm,
an upgrade. And I can use because I'm 100% agree with what you said, Ryan.
mm,
Let's use the body as an example. Okay, a friend of mine who passed away at too early of an age, May Wan Ho. You might know of her work, quantum biologist.
mm,
She actually proved, in fact, she defines the living system as that it's a quantum level that has to cohere us together. And so she talks about, well, even if I go into May Wan stuff, that if you think about it, for any living system, let alone a human being, the scales that have across scales that have to work together,
mm,
from something that spins up the quantum into a particle to become an atom, to become a molecule, to become groups of molecules, to organs,
mhm,
right? I mean, that's 2/3 of the known 73 octaves of the spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, that has to cohere together. Okay, so we've got hearts and lungs and livers and all these parts, right? So if you look at them on one scale, it looks like, oh, the stomach's doing its thing. It's completely different than what the liver's doing and what the lungs are doing. Well, yeah, they are doing things at different rhythms and rates. But we back up another holistic scale, they are working in a perfectly coordinated way
mm,
to work together coherently and harmoniously for us to be alive and repair itself and live through life, right? Am I making sense? So
mm.
when we talk about coming into coherence, so the next level is all of us, ourselves, in a greater superorganism. It's the same thing, right? Where sometimes people, I think, miss the point when we talk about becoming a global society, or the new earth, right? The new is that, oh, it means I have to lose my identity, or no, it's like the heart doesn't lose its identity, or the lungs don't, but yet they're doing their thing. They're just doing it really well
100%.
in a coherent system.
Yeah. You
You follow
actually
what I mean?
find
So we
your
don't.
identity. I
Yeah.
believe
So
you. Go on.
the individuals get to thrive,
Yeah.
or so, when we live in a coherent group or society.
Yeah. I love that because I really do find that you really you don't lose yourself. You end up
Find
identifying the
yourself.
very aspect. Yeah, 100%. You find what is a Ryan? What is a Rollin? Who are we? What do we have? What do we bring? And how do we bring that in the service of others? And I
Yeah,
think,
and how do we raise Ryan and Roland's and consciousness to the level
yeah.
of awareness of understanding who we really are at that higher
Mm,
vibrational, that higher level of consciousness? Then our purpose becomes clear,
mm.
and life becomes a grand adventure and a lot more fun.
Oh, well, I could soak in your wisdom. I could soak in your 30 plus years of scientific research in this field, but that would not be a good use of your time today. All I want to say is thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for all that you're putting out. Thank you for the courageous work of the heart that you and your colleagues continue to do every day. There's obviously so much that we've talked about that we haven't gone into the absolute depths, but I'll try and cross-reference as much as I can within the show notes. Is there anything specifically that I've not asked you that you'd love to share in this conversation?
Oh, not that, well, there's so much places, like you said, we could go. I would just maybe leave the listeners, and whatever you are, a parent, a leader in a business, a small business owner, whatever it might be, that there's nothing that in life that if we become more coherent in our own system and align with who we really are, and start bringing that wisdom into our day-to-day life, that it can't facilitate. Right. So it's really, how do we become a better parent, a better leader, a better business owner? This would be step one from my perspective. It's really waking up to who we really are. And one of the best ways I think to do that is to really become more aware of what we're feeding the field. Am I really feeding the field compassion, compassionate latitude, kindness, deep listening, appreciation? Or am I feeding the field maybe anxiety or frustration or impatience? My biggest message here was it matters, right? In measurable and very real and measurable, tangible ways.
Thank you. I have a word here at Always Better Than Yesterday. It's called Heartprint. And the word really kind of symbolizes on a practical level the impact that we have, the legacy that we leave, the possibilities that we create. And I'm starting to learn from a quantum perspective that there's always a record of what we put out into the field. So maybe this heartprint that I speak of is more grand than I have once first conceived. But Rollin, come to the end of your time here on this earth in this lifetime. What do you hope that your heartprint will be?
Well, I mean, one of my goals, I probably won't achieve it this lifetime, but is to scientifically prove the existence of the human spirit. Right. So at least I think I'll be remembered for somebody who has had the adventuresome spirit to delve into a little bit deeper aspects of the heart and what it's really about, and as that bridge. And hopefully our work will continue to help many more thousands and millions of people.
Love it. We'll be honored if you leave us a final thought from your good self.
I'm sorry?
I'll be honored if you leave us a final thought from your good self.
Kind of what I did. It's kind of what I thought I just did, but it's really about just stop, pause throughout the day, ask yourself, what am I feeding the field? And if it's not, one of those higher vibrations, take a few breaths, breathe through the heart. We have a lot more choice and power to regulate our emotional diet than most people believe or have been taught. It's really not that hard. And if you need some help doing it, maybe come check out our website. There's a lot of free resources, tools, techniques that can, I think, help really anyone navigate these really challenging times that are going on right now with a little more ease, a little less stress.
Ryan, I appreciate you, brother.
All right. Take care.
Hey my friends, thank you for making it to the end. I hope that our time spent together today has left you a little bit better than before you push play. I'd really appreciate if you just took a moment to leave a review to allow me to meet more people where they are and hopefully leave them a little bit better too. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organisation, then head to alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com to connect. And while you're there, let me know one or two things that you're going to do as a result of listening to this conversation. I absolutely love hearing your thoughts, your reflections, and the things that this spark in your own heart and mind. If you want more insights from my heart and mind, I do send out short episodes on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, and again, I hope that they serve you well. I appreciate you listening. I'm Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, a podcast for heart-centered leaders just like you. Keep leading, my friends. Always love.